crap. Good afternoon, friends. I'd like to welcome you today to What's in Tegan's Storage Locker. It's the show that dares to ask the question, just what is in my storage locker? The answer today, well, friends, the answer is always going to be comic books. I grab a fistful of comic books from, the ether, and we look through them on the camera for your delectation. The first thing I want to do is to point in the direction of the Patreon. If you like this show, if you like what I do, if you want to see me do more of it, that's the place to visit. I got tons of stuff to download on there. If you like this, if you like any of the videos I do or any of the writing I do, that's where you need to show your appreciation. And please, 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 tell all your friends, tell your family, tell strangers whose opinion you value to watch this show. All right, so maybe someone has run himself out because I already tried recording a little bit and then he was completely disruptive. So this is take 2. All right, let's start off with some Spawn, and not just any Spawn, new Spawn, or at least relatively new Spawn. I think this comic is from 2021, yes, August 2021. I paid, I think, $1 for this comic book. I bought it on a shopping trip to a comic book store in another town for $1. A new piece of Spawn art by Greg Capullo with Todd McFarlane on inks. As a wise man once said, I'll buy that for $1. So yeah, I mean, that's a striking looking cover. Guy always looked great. I mean, Spawn always looked great, even when the book was difficult to parse. Spawn is a dynamite-looking book, and I've always maintained he's a strong character. Great origin, lots of, good motivations for a character. The whole double-cross government agent and Faustian bargain and a little bit of heartache mixed in, and boom, great origin. Perfect setup for a character. The problem is, Todd McFarlane just has never really been a coherent storyteller. And that's putting it kind of, I think, kindly. Keeping in mind, I'm saying very nice things about him on the whole. He certainly has gotten quite far with Spawn. His name has, I think, gone on just about every issue of the regular Spawn. Maybe not all the spin-offs, but there have been a lot of spin-offs over the years. A lot of interesting people have done Spawn books. And the series is on issue 350-something. It'll be at 400 before we know it, in the blink of an eye, as these things are considered. And that's remarkable. Go back, if you ever get the chance, and read the Comics Journal's first review of Spawn, when the series debuted back in 1992. Absolutely excoriating, completely merciless. And honestly, I have a fondness for the first run of Spawn. I think it's some of the best Spawn, actually. But the journal wasn't wrong when it pointed out all of the problems with it. And the fact that, there's always been a little bit of a mercenary air to the guy. We know, because he's told us. He sat down to try to figure out how to make a popular character that people would love. And he loves the guy. That's clear. And yet at the same time, he is the character that Todd McFarlane knew his audience would embrace. And, to be fair, here we are, all these years later, still talking about Spawn, 32 years after the fact. I think Spawn is a great character. I think that there's probably still a few good movies that they could make with the guy. Pare him down to the origin and, put some shape on the stories in his universe. And that's something that Todd McFarlane is just, and, that's the reason why I turned my back on the book the first time around, because I don't think I'd been reading it for years. It was still worth buying to look at. You know, maybe pick up on some of the purple prose, but even by the late 90s, the continuity was becoming strangely baroque, considering very little of consequence ever seemed to happen in the book. But that's just, you know, that's just how life works. Todd sat in one place, and he accrued a saga. I'm not going to say it's a story necessarily, but it's a saga. And he's been able to hire some really nice people, nice talent, to flesh it out over the years. And here, 5 artists all working on backups, all very talented. Sean Lewis is writing the book with additional dialogue from Todd, and Todd is writing the backups all by himself. So this first part of the story is devoted to King Spawn by Javi Fernandez. And here we go. Something bad is happening. Children are being hurt. That's something that really brings Spawn. Like you're ringing the dinner bell. He doesn't necessarily have a specific mission in terms of hunting down evildoers, but he seems to just want to get rid of truly vicious people. Because otherwise, he's honestly a very lazy character. He sits around the alleyway sitting in a throne of trash. That status quo remained for years. That there was never any movement on that book. I still don't know if there's any movement on the book, but, you know, this is interesting. This is more of a newfangled usage of text page device. And of course, you know, Todd was one of the pioneers there. He put those 3 talking heads in every issue of Spawn. And he got that, of course, from Howard Chaykin. Fair is fair. But, you know, Todd stole from the best. He got the chains wholesale from, you know, the Ghost Rider relaunch in the 1990. No one was doing chains like that until Ghost Rider. And then Todd was like, oh, they sort of look like webbing. I can do something with that. Man, look at this. It's a nice looking comic book. Wow. Anytime, I'm just a sucker for a Venetian blind sign. In comics, anytime I see Venetian blinds, it's a really, I'm sure, once you get the trick, I'm sure it's a really simple effect. But it never fails to impress me because it looks so good on the page. And of course, you can't do it all the time because it doesn't really make that much sense for every scene. But everyone in Spawn has like these half-drawn Venetian blinds because it worked so well for Miller. And, you know, Todd goes with what works. Okay, that's gross. There you go. And these guys, you know, he put a lot of work into Spawn. He put a lot of work into Spawn's origin, setting up, you know, his universe. And then these guys, I swear, 15 minutes. And he probably figured, like, okay, there's a big guy who talks a lot and a little guy who doesn't say a lot, but he's really good with his pistol. 15 minutes, early lunch. And it's perfect. You see them in a comic book, and you know what their deal is. They've had their own comic book in the past. They have their own comic book again. I think coming out just this week. So, you know, you look at them on a comic book page, you know exactly what their deal is. There's our dude. Oh, and there's some gore. Can't have Spawn without the gore. The body of Metatron is splattered everywhere. His body literally ripped limb from limb. You could have cut out the repetitive use of body in that one. I mean, it's Todd. Oh, there you go. What was I just saying? Boom. There you go. And of course, you can tell from the age of these people that it's more or less a sliding time scale. There is a credited editor. He didn't used to have a credited editor. I'd be interested in finding out what that editor actually does with his days. Deals with all the, you know, logistics of putting the book together. But still, man, if you weren't around for the discourse around the launch of Image, my goodness. All hail King Spawn. See, I don't know what's going on here. I don't really need to know. Haunt. Who's doing that? Javi Fernandez. All right. I know that name. Oh, there we go. That's sometime in like the 2000s. Todd decided that he was going to try to launch a new super guy in the same universe as, but kind of independent from Spawn, and that's the dude. I think he had a respectable run, and then he just sort of slunk into the background of Spawn, I think, and here he is. Is he dead? Huh. Oh, no, he's healing. I guess he's got this... It looks like the Anti-Venom costume. I can't actually remember if this premiered before the Anti-Venom costume, but I mean, now admittedly, the Anti-Venom costume is not like a real top shelf idea in terms of originality. Just flip the covers on Venom, but it worked so well, and it took them like 20 years to figure that trick out. Well, okay, there you go. Nightmare. All right. Marcio Takara. All right, this is a nice looking page. Oh, wow. Look at this dude. This dude's awesome. Yeah, this dude's awesome. He's got teeth. Oh, he bites that guy. My name is Nightmare. Do you know why that is? Because I can extract your black soul and make it ooze down your body. Then scoop maggots from the rotting carcass of other traitors so you can taste the sweet nectar of betrayal. And before you die, take solace. You're not alone. Others like you have also lost their way. See now, that's what you get from Todd. Todd knows what his people want. And Philip Tan, I like Philip Tan. Philip Tan's had a good couple of years. What are you doing? Philip Tan's doing his own inking now, I believe, because there's no one else on the cover, but for other projects as well. I think he's interesting as an inker, inking his own stuff. Interesting use of line weight. Okay, so here's this guy. It's just people just exploded because that's what people do in Spawn's universe. I see you woke up and decided to join us. What a ding-dong. Yes, report me to the ASPCA. Call my cat a ding-dong. Okay, so this is a hero dude who... Next time you want me, think of my name. It's Comox. So it's like a Captain Marvel riff. Interesting. Doing a Captain Marvel riff in a Spawn book. Did you come to be disruptive? You succeeded if you did. Gunslinger, and this is Brett Booth. I actually bought an issue of the Gunslinger Spawn. Nice looking comic book, to be honest with you. You know, great looking. What are you doing? I'm trying to ignore you. I tried to play with him for hours. He has no interest. The moment I turn my back, he wants nothing more than my attention. That's what he wants. He just wants my attention, period. Doesn't like it when I talk to the comic books. All right. No, you don't like the comic books. You don't approve. Regular Wortham over here. So yeah, there's a Spawn doing cowboy stuff. That's just, it's cool. That's awesome. Oh, and he's got a motorcycle. Cowboy Spawn has a motorcycle. 1 second he was living in the year 1864. The next he was here, 160 years in the future, robbed of his chance to exact retribution. But he swears on his sister's grave he'll avenge her. He'll somehow get back to where he came from, and God help anyone who got in his way. So that's cool. Sort of like a hex setup. Only instead of our future, he just lands in the present. Todd McFarlane interviews Sean Lewis. Sean Lewis interviews Todd McFarlane. The Year of Spawn. So yeah, he just launched Gunslinger, he just launched Scorch. I think I actually got all these number ones. Just, you know, I don't know if I paid full price for any of them, but, you know, they ordered a lot of them. You know, interesting. There's the dude. interesting flipping through an issue of Spawn every now and again. Recommended for your health. Now, doing more than flipping through the occasional issue of Spawn. Maybe not something your doctor would recommend. What do we got now? All right. Let's just be a total pander bear. Pander bear. I'm putting up the card. We did Spawn. Let's do Batman. And not just any Batman. No, not just any Batman. This is one of the greatest single issues of Batman that has ever been printed by universal acclaim. That's not some, weird opinion of mine. Special introduction by Stephen King. Whole book is written by Doug Moench, who was, in as much of a position to write this kind of book as anyone. Illustrated by Art Adams, Terry Austin, Brian Bolland, John Byrne, Paris Cullins, Mike Grell, Michael W. Kaluta, Carl Kiesel, Joe Kubert, Steve Leiloha, Rick Leonardi. I'm only on the L's, folks. Steve Lytle, Larry Malstead, Bruce Patterson, George Perez, Steve Rude, Bill Sienkiewicz. Well, in all the time I've been recording, he's never actually pulled down the camera before, so I guess that's a milestone, if nothing else. I wasn't even done with the list. Steve Rude, Bill Sienkiewicz, Ken Stacy, Tom Sutton, Ricardo Villagrán, Bernie Wrightson. And you see here this extraordinarily famous portrait of Batman from Bill Sienkiewicz. He did a few pieces for DC around this time. Nothing major. And this is actually a pretty decent essay on Batman. I don't know if I agree with everything he says in it, but it's definitely, he sets out a reason why he actually likes Batman, as opposed to the sort of the companion piece for this was the Action Comics 400, or Superman 400. The big Superman book they did that was the same format as this. And they got Ray Bradbury to write the introduction to that. And he doesn't seem very engaged by the job. Stephen King actually does seem to really have affection for Batman. I don't think he's ever written a Batman story, though. He's probably answered that in an interview at some point why he's never done that, but I guess he just doesn't want to take the pay cut. So yeah, this looks like a burn splash of, actually kind of an interesting splash, because you got these really tiny figures here with this big black, just a giant spotted black right in the middle of the page, and then these looks like pencil sketches of the rest of the rogues. Interesting. All right, so this is Steve Lytle and Bruce D. Patterson. Steve Lytle was a big deal at the time. He was a big draw. He was a big draw when they got him to do Doom Patrol. He didn't last very long on that book, but that was a big deal for the time. And his covers were a big part of the Legion's success during the period. No doubt. And this is, I guess, a cross section, not just to the, there's a Joker. Was Two-Face Janet? I don't remember what was going on at the time. What was going on in Batman up to issue 400? Mad Hatter, Croc, who is still not an Animal Man yet. There's Clayface 2? Oh man, I've read the Clayface story. I can't keep them straight, which is which. The Riddler, the Cavalier. Well, they must have just picked a Gomer to represent all the, one and dones. I think he fought the Cavalier a few times, but he was not a very popular villain. Catman. Catman. He was never a big presence. Poison Ivy, who already had sort of, I actually think, no, Croc is the most recent of these. There's old Penguin himself. Although, why is the Penguin, are they in jail? Oh yeah, this is Arkham, but the Penguin shouldn't be in. Neither the Penguin nor Catman, nor really the Cavalier, I think. I mean, arguably the Riddler, even. So this is, oh man, look at this. Look at this. Yeah, these people brought their A game for this book. He is still obsessed with trying to pull down that front blind. I've already had to stick something in front of it so that other people can't just look into my apartment. He has absolutely no couth whatsoever. Oh, so I guess the Joker got everyone's clothes. And oh, this is perfect. Who do you get to draw all of the Batman villains having a confab? Well, you get George Perez. He didn't draw very much Batman, but he knows how to draw all these guys. He draws a great Joker. All right, so the Joker's got some plan. Or no, that's not the Joker. Someone else freed them. I don't even remember. What was I talking about before I went and played with the small one for a considerable amount of time? And he's actually sitting down. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I've got a little bell on a string on a pole. That's about the only thing that can keep his interest for any amount of time anymore. The laser pointer has just completely lost its mystique for him. For some reason, he was really big into the rattly ball for months and months and months, and now he's just cold on it. I don't know. I think he enjoys playing with me when I record, but I don't record every night. So, still George Perez. He's still just drawing the hell out of everyone in a Batman comic. All right, Paris Cullins. Paris Cullins, people forget he was sort of a name for a few minutes back in the 80s. Interesting style. Kind of looser, but more cartoony. Maybe a sort of half step towards, people like Parabeck, who really came out of the animated school style in the 90s. Is that Tarantula? Is that guy's name? I don't even remember. Oh, and here's Bill Sienkiewicz drawing Ra's al Ghul. Yeah, they weren't going to give Bill Sienkiewicz, well, they could have given him the Riddler, but they gave him Ra's al Ghul. Oh man, look at this. Tonight, Detective, they run like a pack of mad wolves, raking chains through the shadows. You see, I freed them, Detective, all of them. So basically, it's the Nightfall plot, only, when Bane did it, it lasted much longer than a simple extra-large comic book. So, basically, there are casualties, people have died. He's not happy with Ra's al Ghul. Join me in reshaping the world, Detective, and I will help you recapture your foes. Or should you prefer even eliminate them forever? You freed every last one of my arch enemies just so you could offer to kill them? That does kind of sound like something he'd do. Yeah, Ra's al Ghul, he doesn't necessarily play with any of the other rogues from, Batman's Rogues Gallery. I think he's done a couple stories with the Joker, but only a couple. There's just not a lot of cause for these people to meet otherwise. All right. Oh, so apparently Ra's al Ghul is he's playing this game. He's still playing the game, and he's like, it's idiotic that you let these people, yank your chain like that, but I'm still going to play along. I'll still give you the Riddler's clue because you insist on playing this, absolutely silly game with them. And he see, because that's how Ra's al Ghul sees it. He sees it as just, silly thing that the detective does to fill his time. And this is Arthur Adams and Terry Austin. Now this is 1986. I think Longshot was still on the stands in 1986. And people knew straight up as soon as they saw Art Adams. There's no question whatsoever. That's when he started drawing the X-Men. And, the X-Office knew, well, not to put him on a monthly book, to have him do those annuals and specials. That looked so good that we still talk about highlights of the Claremont run. Oh, there you go, Scarecrow, Poison Ivy. The kind of the B team, B- team, because Poison Ivy, she wasn't really much of a player in the 80s, I don't think. Scarecrow, he was around a bit. But he was not someone who was in a lot of comic books for a long time. And I want to say that she wasn't even used for a while either after she was invented. And Catman, there was never really a prime era of Catman, like maybe back to the Golden Age, but not in the Bronze. Oh, there's the Riddler with a underlit Jim Lee panel right there. Man, this looks good though. Vintage, early Art Adams. When he's still, putting every line he can on the page. You came to see the Art Adams? Is that it? You came to see the Art Adams? All the Image people, every single one of them. There were a few artists that they just, poured over. Walt Simonson was one of them. Frank Miller was another. Art Adams was a third. I think possibly Rick Leonardi was as well. But Rick Leonardi was an influence on Adams. Definitely. Only a couple years between them. But that Cloak and Dagger series was, I think, a lot more important than necessarily is credited by a lot of people. All right, so this is Tom Sutton and Ricardo Villagrán. That's very nice looking. And, okay, Penguin's A-list. But certainly Deadshot was still nowhere near A-list. He was stuck with Killer Moth and Mad Hatter. There have actually been, I think the 80s was a good time for Mad Hatter. He's just, he was on the cartoon in the 90s, but just never cared for the Mad Hatter at all. Now, the White Rabbit. If we must have a Lewis Carroll invented villain, we must have the White Rabbit. Don't have a lot of patience for that guy. Not my favorite. That's a cool looking Batman just like sitting in the middle of the kitchen. Oh, and there's the ringleaders. Penguin and Joker. What about the money, you treacherous jackanape? Ra's al Ghul insisted Batman would have a way of coming up with it. You were supposed to demand $10 million. But don't you see, Penguin? Only because Ra's thinks that's what I want. Yeah, but Penguin wants the money. But money's easy to get, while the thrill for me has always been the game itself. See, he's not a very dependable partner. Has anyone ever really been happy for teaming up with the Joker? And there's Talia al Ghul. Already, the Al Ghul family is just, an inextricable part of the Batman mythos, and it's only like 15 years old at the time this comic was written. Ra's al Ghul was, one of those characters who debuted at the dawn of the Bronze Age. One of the first big, Bronze Age characters, I'd say. And certainly, pretty much instantly became, at least the top 3 or 4 guy for Batman. And that's pretty good for a character who was introduced after Batman had already been around for, I'm doing math in my head, like over 3 decades. Man, that's a nice looking Poison Ivy, Steve Leialoha. If you go on this channel, there's one of the earliest releases on this channel was a video compilation of a series called Steel Town Rockers that he drew, that is just an absolutely gorgeous, forgotten gem that Marvel just coughed out in the early 90s. No one remembers it. It's a fantastic book. You should look for it at your earliest opportunity. And she gets to fight Poison Ivy. There you go. You get Steve Leialoha to draw Catwoman versus Poison Ivy. Boom. There you go. I'd buy the book just for that. But hey, here's some Joe Kubert with Andy Kubert letters. Man. You know, Kubert, he didn't draw superheroes that often. But he drew them a fair amount. And they looked, you know, his Batman is very distinctive. You're not going to mistake it. You know, it's very much on model. It's not weird or anything. But at the same time, it's very... I keep asking him what's so fascinating about that front window, but he just refuses. He refuses to give me an answer. All right, so Batman's just wrecking a bar with swinging a pool cue around. Joe Kubert doesn't get to draw any of the villains. He actually gets to draw something fun, which is Batman just like wrecking a bar. Love it. Oh, and here's Ken Stacy drawing a nice Catwoman. Nice. Ken Stacy, sort of an unsung, eclectic talent, I'd say, especially when he got into doing the airbrushed work in the late 80s. Nothing quite like it in the whole industry. Definitely, I think, he was one of the more successful artists to operate in the spaces that I'd say Bill Sienkiewicz opened in the mid-80s. Interesting, unique talent. All right, who was I just saying? Rick Leonardi and Carl Kiesel. So yeah, this is put together with not just, you know, heavyweight talent from DC, but someone was paying attention to the Marvel line enough that they were able to look over and get the hot shots. This is when Leonardi was doing fill-in work on Uncanny X-Men and Amazing Spider-Man. Think about that. He was a regular fill-in artist on both of those books for multiple years in the 80s. That right there, that's not something you see very often. So, you know, that was after he'd done this is with Carl Kiesel on inks. He'd done his years on Cloak and Dagger with Terry Austin. Now, those are gorgeous books. If you've never read the Rick Leonardi and Terry Austin Cloak and Dagger, get thee hence and find them. Because this is a very nice... He'd come back to DC in the new century. Did some Batgirl work. I think he did some Batman, too. Draws a very good Batman. Very nice. Very nice. Brian Bolland. And it doesn't list an inker, so, you know, these 6 pages probably took like 3 months. But man, you see it. You see every minute that he takes right there on the page. You know, this, if anything, you could maybe sometimes accuse him of stiffness. And that's, you know, just a consequence of that type of deliberate style. But at the same time, his understanding of physiology is too good. I mean, look at this. This character is balanced on their legs, leaning back, firing a gun, so they're about to lose their balance. But that's a really just a dynamic, tiny panel. But you see, Robin kicking, Catwoman pouncing, Talia firing her crossbow. Wow. Man, there's a reason why Brian Bolland is Brian Bolland. With the exception of, I have to admit, he's gone down significantly in my estimation, since I've heard him so assiduously dogging the original coloring for The Killing Joke. And that is the coloring is just about the best thing in it. I understand he's a real perfectionist, but at the same time, it's just tacky, man. From someone who's in, you know, the cat-bird seat, historically speaking, absolutely unimpeachable. Influence on artists all over the world. It's just tacky. Oh, man. Oh, man. argue with results, though. There you go. The sound of this moment is deafening, but it is neither the thunder of collapsed ceiling nor the roar of shearing walls which will mark his memory. Instead, he will be forever haunted by the thrashing and shrieking of a frenzied death beaten into a vessel of unnatural life. So I don't know what Ra's al Ghul's plan was, but here we go. Looks great. It's dense as hell. You know, it looks like a 2000 AD page, but it looks really good. And I think this is more Bolland, yep. And one person they didn't get, they didn't get Barry Windsor Smith. Windsor Smith, I think he did a couple of pinups over the years. That's it. He never even did, like, a Batman story, singular. How weird is that? He must have just not liked DC. Because if you think about it, how did Barry Windsor Smith not draw a Batman story? Even just one. No? Mike Grell, that's a nice Mike Grell piece. Oh, man. Oh, man. Now, Kaluta, he's drawn a fair amount of Batman, especially in his 70s work. He did the Batman Family. And there's a nice Wrightson piece. Kind of wonky angle, I'm going to be honest with you. It's kind of an unusual Wrightson piece, but interesting for that. And there's Steve Rude. This is an interesting piece from Steve Rude. Interesting. And keep in mind, this is 4 issues before Batman Year One. And this right here looks like he's been peeking ahead at what Mazzucchelli's doing. I don't think he was. But doesn't it look like he's anticipating that? He's anticipating, Sin City. Man, just this one pinup. My goodness. I think his big Batman book was actually the kind of an uncharacteristic Batman book. He did the first big World's Finest book after Crisis, which I have, and I will probably be reading on the channel at some point. And here's the cover without any. It was so nice they put it on here without any trade dress for us. What was I saying? Yeah, I will be reading that on the TikTok one of these days. The Steve Rude and Dave Gibbons. Steve Rude and Dave Gibbons teamed up and did the first World's Finest limited series after Crisis. And it is every bit as gorgeous as that description would imply. From, I think, the year after the Batman comic. This is 1987 issue of Web of Spider-Man. Part 1 of, what's the name of this? What's the Matter with Mommy? Oh yeah, this is an interesting one that I sought out especially recently because I didn't have this particular run of stories, but I was extraordinarily interested in finding it because this has been completely forgotten. It's not necessarily a well-remembered Spider-Man story at all. But just a little while after Kraven's Last Hunt, which was a remarkably popular story, it was a bid for relevance, everyone loved it. It was a really successful story, and it ran monthly in each of the Spider titles. It just took 2 months of Amazing, Spectacular, and Web of Spider-Man to tell the whole story. So they tried that gimmick again a little bit later, I think just a few months later, with this, what is the name of the story? I'm trying to remember, because that's not the name of the whole story. This is Mad Dog Ward? Yeah, I think it's the Mad Dog Ward is what they call it. Because basically, oh, there I go again. I've been pretty good about it lately, haven't I? I haven't forgotten. The whole the hook of this is, I think, Spider-Man ends up in a mental ward. And if you're thinking, well, that kind of sounds terrible, the other half of that equation is that it's written by Nocenti. Oh, did you perk up there? Oh, well, that kind of dodgy concept might have some legs with the right creator. and not just Ann Nocenti. What really makes this story special, and the reason why I recommend this run, the Mad Dog Ward, especially, is Cindy Martin. If you don't know this woman's name, she could have, should have been huge, extraordinarily talented, drew some of the nicest looking Star Wars comics that have ever been made. She did the bulk of the later run of Star Wars, and it is gorgeous. She should have been able to write her own ticket in this industry after her run on Star Wars. Of course, no one was buying Star Wars at the time, but enough people were paying attention that she did get this Spider-Man story. Unfortunately, it didn't really lead to anything. She never really seemed to make a connection with a writer or an editor. I don't know what exactly it was, but she left Marvel. She could have been huge. As much as I love Mark Silvestri, and I believe my affection for the work of Mark Silvestri is public knowledge, the fact of the matter is, she, Cindy Martin, could have taken over Uncanny and done a bang-up job with it. I think. There's an alternate universe where she gets the job. And maybe the book becomes something completely different. But I really think that there's a lost opportunity. She should have gone and done something at the X office, and she never really did. And she's just gorgeous. She's got a little bit of Tony Salmons in her creative DNA, I think. I think there's some similarities as well between her and Mary Wilshire and Colleen Doran. Came along a little bit later. Clearly, all female artists working with a more pronounced, shall we say, illustrative feel, while also, I think, just having something that really, and you can put Jan Duursema in this bunch too. All the women who were working as artists at that point in the industry had super solid fundamentals. They had to. They weren't going to get any job at all if they couldn't draw twice as good as the boys. That's just how it worked. At least that's how it worked back then. And you look and you see, this is, kind of abnormal stuff for a Spider-Man book. It starts off, and I think this first issue is mostly domestic drama. And I think she's suffering from serious mental illness. She ends up, something happens to her in this issue. And so she ends up going to oh man, look at that. There's Kevin Maguire right there. If you revere Kevin Maguire for what he can do with the human face, Cindy Martin is the person you need to be looking at. You need to be going and finding her work. Anything that she did for Star Wars. The last couple of years of Star Wars at Marvel had close to an all-female creative team. And really kind of a pioneering run in terms of trying its best in terms of figuring out what Star Wars could be after the end of Return of the Jedi. So it goes in some interesting directions. And it looks gorgeous. Star Wars has rarely looked so good. And here's some, domestic drama. This is within I just mentioned Longshot. This is within a year, at least less than a year of Longshot. And Ann Nocenti's already got a reputation as a writer, enough to be, doing a Spider-Man story. But at the same time, she's doing this sort of strange domestic drama. And mental illness becomes a theme. Certainly in her Daredevil. Daredevil deals with that in a couple different ways. I think of all the mainstream writers to tackle the theme of mental illness, I think Ann Nocenti is probably come as close as anyone to doing it any justice, considering, you know, Jim Starlin, I think, does a fairly decent job as well. Steve Gerber. And Ann Nocenti, she made a point of writing about it as well a few times, and she put a lot of consideration into just about everything she wrote. And here's Spider-Man walking through the story, thinking about stuff that's happening in other Spider-Man books. He just got married. And that was he's talking about Kraven's Last Hunt, because he's talking about battling vermin and being buried alive. And the interesting thing about this story is it even mentions Kraven's Last Hunt, but it does the same thing Kraven's Last Hunt did, which was Spider-Man was missing for weeks, and Mary Jane just about lost her mind, and that was a big part of the story. And then this story also involves him being away without her knowing for weeks on end, because he ends up getting stuffed in a mental hospital. Man, just look at this. Look at how perfect this is. Look at it. How Cindy Martin did not become famous. I don't know. I've never read an interview with her talking about why, but I don't know. Lots of reasons why. She should have been huge. She should have been huge. And man, they were selling us a lot of zit cream at the time. And this stuff just made the problem worse. Always just made the problem worse. Dries your skin out terrible. All right. So, yeah, these kids run into Peter Parker. And so he doesn't... Oh, so... He stays up. Oh, that is a nice picture of Peter Parker just like hanging out on his wall right there. That's interesting. That's the kind of stuff that writers and artists should be more creative with. Look at this arm. Wow. Now, I will say this. I'm all for Marvel Unlimited for some things. But I tried to read this on Marvel Unlimited, and the digital, you know, the recoloring, it just looked awful. Looked awful. Sapped all the life out of this fantastic art. So, oh wow, the kid has a gun. I don't know what's going on. And you get your money in funny ways. Why don't you know how to treat mommy right? You made her crazy. I hate her. So, oh yeah, is this the cops? These don't look like cops. These look like soldiers. Oh, so is there something going on with the Mad Dog Ward? I don't know. This is a weird one. This is very much an Ann Nocenti, story. You got the paramilitary goons, domestic drama, and man, look at this Spider-Man. Look at this Spider-Man. You ain't never seen that black costume look quite so good as that, have you? Man. Now we'll be able to get some sleep, because he couldn't sleep because he knew that there was something going on with those kids. And that's Spider-Man for you. Oh, but he missed one of the soldiers. And the soldiers got one of the kids. Uh-oh, there you go. He drops the kid. Spider-Man's got to go. He saves the kid, because of course Spider-Man saves the kid, but the only way to save the kid is basically to break his side, colliding with the wall there. Looks like he probably broke half a dozen ribs, at least. Possibly his shoulder. Oh, man. And he doesn't have Spider-Man doesn't have a healing factor, per se. He always heals pretty well, pretty quickly. But he gets sick a lot. There you go. And see, that's why that wasn't a very healthy marriage, because he was always doing stuff like that. Oh man, striped chips. I think I've gone on about the striped chips before. I miss them. If they made striped chips again, that would be a good day. That would be a good day in the history of the Republic. If you work for the Chips Ahoy people, you should let them know that some random person on the internet wants them to go back to making the striped Chips Ahoy. Beat Bond at his own games. It must have been salad years for TSR. They were putting out all kinds of games, and they owned the back page in Marvel for years. They were putting out the Dungeons and Dragons, but they were also putting out war games and sci-fi stuff too. All right, so this is early DeFalco era bullpen bulletins. So you got a Ralph Macchio profile with a rather discomfortingly large nose there. He was well into his period editing Captain America, Daredevil, Fantastic Four, and Thor. So really steering the heart of the line there. And this is into the Nocenti Daredevil, because this is a quote from Daredevil 249, which is right before John Romita Jr. takes over on art with Al Williamson. So this is, the new universe is kind of it's not gone, but it's fizzling out by now, I think. And John Romita Jr. is a long, long way from having anything to do with the new universe anymore. Yeah, they don't have the new universe books in the regular bullpens. They were separated off they had their own bullpens page. Oh, and this is during the run of Conan Saga. Conan Saga, the early run of it, is as rare as hen's teeth because it's black and white Barry Windsor Smith, his first 20 so issues on Conan. I have some of them. I have a few of them, but those aren't books that people want to give up. So if you see them, grab them. Conan Saga, especially the early run. Captain Justice, based on the movie True Colors. No clue what that is. And that issue of Daredevil that quote is from the Wolverine two-parter right before John Romita Jr. takes over. And it's drawn by Rick Leonardi, who did a fair amount of Daredevil at this time as well. He did a few Daredevil fill-ins. G.I. Joe Special Missions. I think there were a couple G.I. Joe books. I actually think there were 3 G.I. Joe books for a while because they had G.I. Joe, I don't know if they were calling it G.I. Joe Classics, but they reprinted like the first 20 or so issues of the Hammond G.I. Joe. Strike Force Morituri was still going. It lasted a couple years, and then they actually wrapped it up with a bookshelf format limited series. And Mark Grunold had just started his Captain America epic. They were just launching Solo Avengers. Yeah, so this is the early DeFalco era. They got a Sam Glanzman book coming out. Transformers was on 35. They were 6 issues into the Steve Englehart, Marshall Rogers Silver Surfer, which is my favorite Silver Surfer run. And that means that the Punisher solo book was just in its first half dozen issues as well, because they launched those the same month. But yeah, Mark Silvestri had just taken over X-Men 224. He had just started after his run on Web of Spider-Man. He did 6 months of Web of Spider-Man. And Classic X-Men was 16 issues into its run, but it had already moved on to the John Byrne years. All right. How are we doing? I actually think we have time enough for one more, if it's a quick one. Issue of Iron Man. An issue of Iron Man, not just any Iron Man. 1995 Iron Man. On the brink of the crossing Iron Man. And this is kind of a big deal for Iron Man, because we've looked at Iron Man and Avengers from around the crossing. And the crossover just blew the heart and soul out of the books. I'm not saying they were good before that, but the Avengers was readable for a while under Bob Harris and Steve Epting. And then they did the crossing, and just about every bit of charm those books might have had This was well into the Force Works years, which no one liked. The art from the first few issues of Force Works is kind of interesting, but it wasn't a good book, not a very well remembered book. So they had to do something. But ultimately, this is just one of the steps that led them down to the necessity of Heroes Reborn. Now, they could have done it any number of other ways that were less harmful to the company, but they had to do something, clearly, because, this is a nice-looking book is the thing. I was flipping, through this, and it is a very nice-looking comic book for mainstream Marvel 1995, but at the same time, the story, they're clearly having problems. They're clearly having problems. Operation Dumbo Drop, I remember this being fun because it's got Danny Glover and Ray Liotta and Dennis Leary, which is kind of an interesting lineup for a family movie, but just like, Ray Liotta playing with an elephant for an hour and a half. Okay, whatever. See, this is Tom Morgan. He's inking himself. And I guess this is his last issue. He'd been drawing a lot of Iron Man. He drew some Iron Man fill-ins, and I want to say the late 80s. Then he had a solid, maybe a couple dozen issues of Iron Man. At this point, he's saying, thanks for the ride, Marvel, adios. I don't know if he was leaving the industry, but this is interesting. This is clearly someone who has been paying attention to Frank Miller all along. This is nice looking work. And of course he's leaving. I remember not knowing what to think of his work when I was a kid, but I look back and realize that he was doing something interesting. So this is, I guess, the beginning of Terry Cavanagh's run. No inker. Ariani, colorist, color separations by Malibu. So they were already into the Malibu era of coloring. But man, this is an interesting looking book. It looks like it's just recapping. And, the fix is already in. By the time, the book changes writers here, they already know what's going to be happening in the crossing. And, I'm going to spoil the crossing for you. So, stop the video if you don't want to know that in the crossing, it is revealed that Tony Stark is evil. He was turned into a fifth columnist by Kang decades ago. And this is the explanation also for his alcoholism, is that the mind control, he was fighting it. So that was why that happened. And that's a nice look. So honestly, this is probably my favorite Iron Man armor, the very first, the gray armor that he only had for a couple issues, but it is so sharp. I don't have a lot of toys, but I have a toy of that one to put on the shelf. What are you doing? What are you doing? This is our last comic for today. You don't have to be disruptive anymore. I'm almost done. All right. Oh, here you go. We're already well into the mid-90s in terms of, Marvel's got their brand on a lot of stuff. Oh, man. These look like nice pieces of art on these cards here. Is that Stephen Butler? That looks like Mike Allred. Eskimo Pie and Welch's. And, it's not the best Iron Man armor. It's not the worst Iron Man armor either. Taking in a few of the elements from the Iron Man 2020 armor, which I guess was sort of supposed to be a hint that the character was having a villainous turn. Oh yeah, I remember this was an interesting gimmick. It was gain an altitude, fly up into the atmosphere, escape the atmosphere, stop in relation to the Earth's rotation. Yeah, and I remember Iron Man was doing this trick a few times, and just letting the speed of the Earth, which I guess, you can do if you're Iron Man. But yeah, look at this. Even these, nothing pages where Tony Stark's just walking around talking to people. This is nice looking stuff. Combo Man. Combo Man. God, Combo Man. We used to be a country. We used to make things in this country. Hate combos, though. They always tasted like dog food to me. Man, look at this. Look at how nice this looks, though. There's Mrs. Arbogast, who didn't really have much of a presence in Iron Man after he came back from Hero's Return, I don't think. She may have been part of the Kurt Busiek run, I think. But I don't think she's part of the character's supporting cast anymore. Pepper Potts, who hadn't been in the book for a while. She was married to Happy, and then they killed Happy during Civil War, I want to say. Not a lot of people. Happy had a much bigger presence in the movies because no one had done anything really to speak of with Happy, other than to marry Pepper Potts to take her off the shelf as a love interest for Iron Man. I always liked his Bronze Age love interests. The Bethany Cabe. I liked Bethany Cabe. And Madame Mask. I think, he has a really interesting relationship with Madame Mask. That's... Who is he sleeping with here? Oh, Bethany Cabe. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. He did get involved with her when he took a villainous turn. Oh. See, I think the Iron Man books, she's a character who has been underutilized by her home book. Bethany Cabe should have shown up in other books doing other things. Okay, straight up. Controversial opinion, perhaps? That's not a terrible costume for her. Now, that U.S. agent costume, I am not happy we've seen the end of that. And of course, the Spider-Woman costume, classic. I love it. It's one of my favorite costumes. When they took her out of this costume, it was a bit sad day in this country. What did I want to turn back for? I don't know. Just watch yourself, young man. Oh. I suppose it was too much to ask that we could just get through the rest of the episode. So anyway, I liked Century. He's just a space guy. I always liked space guy characters, and nothing ever became him after Force Works. And, U.S. Agent hasn't really had... I think he showed up a couple times, but everyone shows up a couple times. Moondragon shows up a couple times. Oh, Exo Squad. I loved Exo Squad. This cartoon was great. It was fantastic. For 1995, Exo Squad was a fantastic cartoon. Go watch it right now. And you're probably going to wonder, wait, they made that in America in 1995? Yes. Very interesting series. Obviously made by people who had a deep affection for stuff like, Robotech and Macross and all that. But American. And in a continuing series when American TV cartoons didn't really do that. Although, to be fair, the Spider-Man cartoon did that, and the X-Men cartoon as well. And that's still kind of a fat subscription form. And some of these books aren't going to be long for this world. Doom 2099... It didn't have a year left at this point. Force Works was dying. I don't know. I don't think Gargoyles lasted that long either. See, this Ren and Stimpy. I think Ren and Stimpy still had some legs at this point. It had a good long run. So did Beavis and Butthead for that matter. So yeah. Are you even listening to me, mister? Have you heard a single word I've said? Well, to be fair, she was going to get her time in the barrel with... disassembled not quite a decade later. But it's his turn to be a schmuck. Oh man, lots of Captain Crunch. Like I said, I had to stop buying Captain Crunch. I like Captain Crunch too much. I can go through a box of Captain Crunch in a day and a half. I really have a problem when the Captain Crunch gets into the house. He's a duplicitous man. You think he's your friend, but he's not your friend. When you invite him into your house, you are inviting the devil. Oh, see, and they already know he's taking a heel turn. This is unexpected. It's not like you to be so spontaneous. The times they are changing, Jarvis, and this little gathering is overdue. Long overdue. Possibly the greatest event in the history of Iron Man and the Avengers begins next month in the one-shot special Avengers: The Crossing. It will rock the universe like nothing before, and once done, things will never be the same. Now, I have the omnibus for The Crossing. I have the omnibus for The Crossing because I think I paid like $25 for it. Yes, I'll pay $25 for a nice hardcover of one of the worst stories ever written. I don't have I have some of The Crossing in the original issues, but by that point, I was not buying those books regularly anymore because they were awful. They were, if you were in the drugstore and you had a couple bucks left, okay, maybe I'll buy the Avengers during The Crossing. Because, man, one will die, one will be born again, and one will betray them all. History's about to change. The lives of Earth's mightiest heroes will never be the same. You've seen the hints, the signs, the omens in the pages of Force Works, the Avengers, Captain America, Iron Man, War Machine, and Thor. Things are happening. Events are occurring. They just don't seem to be right. Now, after witnessing the secrets of the future, experience the cruel and unjust reality that is the present. The Crossing. Next issue. Mark it on your calendars, Iron fans. Next month, new writer Terry Kavanagh is joined by the Smoke and Art team of Adriana Mello and Mark McKenna as Iron Man plunges headfirst into the most incredible series of events ever endured by a Marvel superhero. Possibly correct. Be here for the first installment, Hollow Man. Admittedly, most incredible series of events, yeah, it's hard to top Iron Man, roughly 1995 to 1998. They certainly put him through a ringer. You never would have thought this character would go on to be one of the most popular characters in the world. This guy was nobody. I mean, yeah, he was one of the founding members of the Avengers. He'd been around for 30 years. But this is what he was devolved to. A heel turn in a terrible, terrible story. I pull out issues of Avengers from that period to punish you when you're bad. We looked at this issue of Captain America on the TikTok. And this is issue 15. So Force Works did not have a long run. It was part of The Crossing and then it died. They were launching the Unplugged books, which was part of their run of 99-cent books. The only one of which was worth a damn was Untold Tales of Spider-Man. Untold Tales of Spider-Man was fantastic. It was one of Kurt Busiek, his big moves after Marvel's. He launched Astro City, and he launched Untold Tales of Spider-Man. And honestly, those are two excellent books to have in your CV right there. Kurt Busiek had a good mid-90s. Not a lot of people at Marvel had a good mid-90s. He was practically keeping the company up on his shoulders at this period. Thunderstrike was about to end. I love Thunderstrike. Thunderstrike is one of my favorite Marvel books. The last few issues, when they knew it was going to be canceled, are depressing. The end of the Roy Thomas run, they're just about to bring in Warren Ellis and Mike Deodato, which sounds like a weird creative team for Thor, and it was. But the book needed something because the Roy Thomas run. And to be fair, Warren Ellis did shake Thor up. This is towards the end of this is Mike Lackey. Ron Mars left the Silver Surfer a few issues previous. George Perez is about to take over Silver Surfer, not as penciler, but as writer. Very interesting. He does a very interesting year as writer on Silver Surfer. The DeFalco and Ryan, they still have better part of a year left on the book. So they get to more or less wrap up everything they were doing. This is the end of the year on Clandestine. Clandestine only lasted a year. And the last few issues of it did not have Alan Davis. But he would later come back to do more Clandestine stories at Marvel. I want to say in the 2010s he was doing Clandestine again. Yeah, Terry Kavanaugh's co-writing the issue of Avengers that's coming out here with Bob Harris. Dan Abnett on War Machine. That book's about to end. Fantastic Force. That book is not long for this world. If you ever want to get on Tom Brevoort's good side, go up to it at a convention and get him to sign your run of Fantastic Force. I bet he doesn't get to do that very often. Ask him what happened to Zarathustra. I want to know. All right. Someone is making a lot of noise. I remember the Quick Candy. The Quick Candy was good. It was basically chocolate taffy. It was great. Oh, man. Hey, like I say, the candy they make now today, it sounds like sawdust and, horse manure. All right, that's an interesting pile of comic books right there. We've whiled away significantly more than an hour, but I sort of lost track of how much time I got up to play with the cat. All right, check out the Patreon. That's how you support this channel. I got tons of stuff to download on the Patreon. Check out the TikTok. Tons of reviews. A new review every day on the TikTok and the Instagram. I got compilations of old reviews on this channel. I do a podcast with Claire Napier. It's called Udder Madness. We talk about Top Cow Comics. That's Mark Silvestri, Michael Turner, Witchblade, The Darkness, Cyberforce, all that good stuff. Check out my reviews, my essays every week. More or less, I got something at the Comics Journal. This week, I got a big piece on Joe Casey coming up. I'm excited about that. Should be fun. What else? I don't know. I think I got to go play with the cat. I think I'm going to go eat a snack. I'm hungry. All right. Take care of yourself. Do you need to drink water? Do you need to take your pills? Be well. Be kind to small animals and small children. And just have a wonderful day.